Now, for our final volcano spark of the day, we welcome Savannah Suttle, founder and CEO of Relationship Capital and Schema. She helps families and enterprises drive innovation, strengthen connections, and build lasting legacies. Savannah will explore how longer lifespans and AI are shifting us into the collaboration age, where success depends on who you know and how well you connect. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Savannah Suttle.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for coming. So we actually have a little bit of a change in script, right? So I had this thing planned yesterday, and then I thought, actually I was at a party last night, I was like, you know what, they don't need to hear this part, they need to hear something else. So we're just gonna change it, okay? So, for starters, who here has ever worked in a family business? Raise your hand. Okay. Who has ever wanted to work in a family business, or maybe wanted to work with your family? Raise your hand. Oh, okay. Who here has been like, I have seen what happens in family businesses, and there's no way I would ever want to work in a family business. Like, are you kidding me? Anybody? Oh, no? Nobody has seen like the whole house burn down? Oh, okay, yeah, we got a, it doesn't have to be your family, it can be somebody else's, it's fine. Okay. So, so often, I'm Savannah, and I work with family-owned and operated businesses, family enterprises, and family offices when family dynamics are impacting business operations, okay? And we've all been there. We've all seen how the family structure and the family systems end up impacting everything else. All of a sudden, it's not a cash flow issue, it's a control issue, right? It's not actually about the trust structure, it's really about who's the favorite. In my family, it's Sam, okay? So he's over there. There's this whole menagerie of family systems that impact the business operating systems and vice versa. So how I got into this, right, was I used to be a marriage and family therapist. And I would start working with families where they would come into my office to try to work on their family stuff. And I would have to say, and then they'd leave my office and they'd go back to their business, or they had literally cemented their dysfunction into their operating procedures. Okay, does this sound familiar? Am I the only one who's seen this? Okay, no. So, part of the issue is that these people had assigned roles to themselves and to their kids 10 years ago, and then their business had changed. And they changed, and they grew, and they morphed, and they grew organically, and it was great. But you know what was not organic? Their structure. And sometimes you can have people who are really amazing at growing organically, and they have absolutely no idea how to do systematization. They don't know how to build systems. They don't know how to architect. They don't know how to re-engineer, right? And that's okay. But the problem is that if you are going to build long-term, multi-generational wealth, you have to get good at that part. And you have to be able to get good at it without crucifying your family members for growing or for stagnating. Right? Not everybody has the ability and the neuroplasticity to change constantly all the time. As a matter of fact, we really shouldn't. There's a reason that we as people sleep. There's a reason we need rest. There's a reason seasons happen, right? And we have become so unstitched and untethered from geography. Electricity has unhooked us from our circadian rhythms. That really, when we start thinking about our own biology, right, it used to be, think about this, 200 years ago, you had to know where the food was found, where you gathered it, where you killed it, where you hunted it, who was going to cook it, how. You probably didn't have electricity, had to do it during daylight hours or with a fire. Everything was geographically dependent. Now you can sit in your bedroom for a year and just, not ever talk to anybody except over the phone. You can push a button and food will show up at your door. It doesn't matter what season, doesn't matter what part of the world it's from. You can be completely living in a virtual digital landscape, right? And be completely unstitched. Times are starting to change, and yet our neurological, biological hardware is not evolving as fast as the tech that we are seeing, okay? And so what does this mean? What does this mean for multiple generations? It means that we have older generations who are operating in a very different mode of connecting and showing up in relationships than subsequent generations. Boomers have a different way of organizing their calendars and their commitments than do millennials and than does Gen Z, right? So when you start thinking about the ways that these operating models start to intersect and overlap or cause friction, these are forms of structure. So if you want to look at multi-generational family wealth, multi-generational legacy, how do you maintain that? How do you maintain relational resilience when nobody's on the same page? When there's a natural erosion because the expectation is, why didn't you just call me? And then the expectation is, well, because I thought you would send a text. And then the expectation is, I just replied instantly. I don't see what the problem is. Like, what more could you want from me? You know, like, I was like immediate. How does that not show that I care? You know, we've got over here, we've got being like, you know, you're not here in person, so clearly you must not think this is great, you know? And you've got the millennial who's like, I don't know what I live at gate, you know, B12, okay, with lower back pain and an apartment that I just can't afford, and I'm on like all the time, you know, so I'm here. And then you've got Gen Z who's like, I live constantly, always on, all the time, doesn't matter, I'm here, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Always available, never fully present, right? You have these different threats of connection, different opportunities, different promises, right? Boomers, and I'm overgeneralizing here, so just take that with a grain of salt, but my word is my bond, show up, be there, be square. We grew up with a common social context. We grew up with a common social thread where the news came on at 5 or 6 o'clock every night and everybody saw the same thing. We have the same social and cultural references, right? Going to millennials where we are having to live hybrid between the digital landscapes and the physical landscapes, between generations, the sandwich generation. We're having to navigate both. We are the cross-cultural kids, okay? And the ways that we navigate time, the promise there is, if I can just plan effectively enough, then somehow it'll all get done, right? To Gen Z, where we're starting to look at, there is maximizing everywhere. There are opportunities everywhere. There is a wealth and an abundance of choices everywhere. I now have to prune. And I actually have to start pruning all of my choices at a time when biologically my brain is expanding and building neural networks, which is kind of a mixed message to your physical hardware, right? So how do we, again, look across generations, how do we need to start thinking? So we are at a time now where the, lifespans are longer historically than they have been. So 200 years ago, you had a 50% chance of making it to age 30 in 1825, okay? 1925, you had a 50% chance of making it to 35. That's a 5-year increase. In 2025, the global average life expectancy is a little bit over 74. That is a doubling, more than doubling. Right? So what does this mean? It means that no longer do we have succession planning that's happening in a baton pass kind of way. Instead, we have multiple generations overlapping for decades at a time. Decades. Which means we've now got these different operating systems, these different ways of relating to each other, these different expectations of how we show up, these different expectations of how we show, I care about you, you matter to me, and I'm willing to make sure that I plan my life with you in mind. Right? All of that is a different language now. If we want to be moving into the future together, that means that we have to run in parallel work streams between generations. That means we have to understand with compassion and with strategy what our other family members and counterparts are thinking, feeling, and how they work. This is not just a neurodivergence thing. This is not just a DEI thing. This is a, how do I be effective long term? Because the cost of not doing this effectively, right? Here's what ends up happening. People assume by default that these relationships will grow and build, and yet they don't, right? They start to erode. You're not spending enough time. Myelination, your ability to form connections is still dependent on repetition, on habit, and on exposure, right? You still have to build these neural pathways and these neural networks. The reason that families, particularly families in enterprise, have such an advantage over other businesses is because they have the gift of time. They have the gift of potential teamwork, if they do it right. Now, of course, we all know that there are those stories where it's like, yeah, but I mean, come on, like, have you met my family? Like, come on, I was pretty much like raised by a pack of wolves, and it's like, okay, yes, but at the same time, like, you know exactly what to expect of someone. You know what those reactions are going to be. You're not having to accommodate and develop process in the same way. You can bypass formality because you know exactly what to expect of the people who you already know. And that's a really wonderful thing. It also means that family businesses are inherently usually terrible at creating structure. Because they've never had to develop process, because they know their people, right? Like, oh, Cousin Joey, like, he's just going to get it done. Great, cool. Well, now Cousin Joey is retiring, or he's, falling off the wagon again, and we're having to replace him, And so what does this mean? Or once you start getting your scale and headcount, and oh, no, now we have to do capacity planning. And now we have to start thinking about process. Okay, what does that mean? How do we do that without eroding trust? Because if I now start doing capacity planning, it starts looking like holding people accountable, and sometimes accountability can feel like mistrust, and mistrust can then, if we're not handling this correctly, then it starts to look like erosion, and particularly if you don't have visibility, and now you're all in different time zones, and oh gosh, when did we ever connect anymore? And oh my goodness, like, if we're going to connect at Thanksgiving, and the last time, the thing we're going to talk about is business, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Those are not the times to be building the relationship, right? If we are not intentional about the way that we build our relationships, that we build our connections, they will atrophy. In a society, especially with AI, that never sleeps, right? Obviously, the internet never sleeps. We're already looking at globalization and the time zone changes, all the things, things never sleep. But in an age where everything can turn on a dime from the time you went to bed to the time you woke up in the morning, right? We need to incorporate rhythms intentionally in our lives in ways that we have not had to do in a long time. You have to design, build, and architect your relationships with each other. And whereas you may have historically been able to rely on families as just kind of, oh, well, they'll just be there. I just know they'll be there. They won't anymore. And the reason is because we now have two families. We have the families of origin, and we have families of choice. And historically, based on geography and a lot of other factors, usually the family of origin, the one you were born into, has held a lot of weight. Now, lifespans are longer. Maybe your family of origin mattered most before the age of 30. That doesn't necessarily mean it's still going to matter as much from 30 to 100. Right? Don't take your family members for granted. Don't take your family relationships for granted. If you want to have multi-generational wealth, and I'm not just talking about money, you have to learn how to manage your relationship capital as much, if not more, than your actual your financial capital and your physical assets and all of those things. Because it does not matter what your tax strategy is. It does not matter how great your trust structure is. It does not matter how much money you make or how awesome and amazing and world-changing your business is. If you die and then your kids have it all tied up in the courts because they've decided to sue each other because they can't get along. Right? 90% of businesses fail within the first 3 generations. There are a lot of reasons for that. But again, most of it comes down to if you can't figure out how to collaborate, how to innovate, how to scale, and how to do all of that without crucifying each other, you're going to have a really hard time because usually the more generations there are, the more people there are. That means family businesses have to understand how to scale with headcount. And it also means that they have to then learn how to look at structure and say, this is the structure we have, this is the structure we need to have. And here's how we get there without blaming other people. Here's how we get there without saying, oh, you're bad, or you neglected me, or you da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It comes down to preach the vision, not just the problem. We all know there are problems with ourselves, with each other, etc., right? One of the things that we've done as a society, at least in the States, for the last 35 years or so, we've done a really good job at diagnosing the problem. We're only just now starting to really come out with this design thinking side for relationships, where we're saying, okay, yes, it's not this, but it's that, and also how do we have grace for people who need a learning curve? I think it was Hippocrates who said that the same river is never stepped in twice, right? A lot of times, and I'll speak as somebody who is, I'll speak for self in saying this, even I as a millennial have sometimes held my parents and older generations to unrealistic expectations, unrealistic standards, where they did not receive the level of therapy or the level of emotional education that I received. And so coming in and saying, okay, well, but you should have done this, or you should have done that, da, 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 da. That's not always fair, right? And so if you're a millennial or younger, I want you to start thinking about having grace with your parents and with older generations who may not have the same language. They may not be as fluent in what you are talking about. You may need to have patience with them. And older generations, your younger generations live in digital landscapes that you cannot even fathom. The world is not the same, and in order to adapt, in order to survive, you have to listen. You have to listen, and you have to take them seriously, because what they need is not for you to be captain of their ship. What they need is for you to teach them how to sail. They are going on journeys and in landscapes beyond what you will fathom and what you will survive. It is what you carry, what they carry with them is the you that taught them how to be in these situations, not what they should be. And it looks like I'm out of time. All right, cool, thanks.